My name is Caroline Brooks, and I never thought my best friend from college would be the one to destroy my marriage. But when Marissa stole my husband, I didn't just walk away. I made sure she and he paid for every lie, every secret, every touch they thought they'd hidden. Tonight, I'm telling you exactly how I turned their perfect little world into rubble. So settle in. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Because you're about to hear a story where betrayal meets a very cold, very public revenge. They say the worst kind of betrayal doesn't come from an enemy. It comes from someone who used to know every inch of your soul. I was sitting in my parked car, 2 blocks from the hotel, my phone screen glowing in the dark like it was daring me to hit send. The folder was already open, the one with the videos. I had named it, For You. A little poetic, a little cruel. My thumb hovered over the share button, the soft pulse of my own heartbeat filling my ears. On the sidewalk ahead, I could see the valet rushing to open the door of a black town car. And there she was, Marissa, my former best friend, the woman I had once called my sister. She stepped out, her hand looped through the arm of my husband, Ethan, like it belonged there. He looked relaxed, almost smug. The same smugness I had memorized from years of him thinking he was the smartest man in the room. But tonight wasn't theirs. This night was mine. The city air was sharp with the smell of early spring rain, the kind that makes the pavement shimmer under the streetlights. Boston was noisy around me, horns blaring, snippets of laughter from people spilling out of a nearby bar. But inside my car, everything was silent except for the tight rhythm of my breathing. I felt like I was suspended between 2 lives, the one where I let them get away with it, and the one where I didn't. I checked the time, 8:17 p.m. In exactly 13 minutes, her fiancé, Daniel, would leave work and walk into the restaurant where they had their engagement dinner just last month. He'd be expecting her to meet him there. He wouldn't expect what I was about to give him. My hands tightened around the phone. I had thought about this moment for weeks, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle. There were softer ways to handle it, the kinds of ways therapists and self-help books suggest. Closure, walking away, letting karma do the work. No, that wasn't good enough for me. Not after what they did. When I first suspected something between Marissa and Ethan, I told myself I was imagining it. I had to be. She was the one who had stood beside me in my wedding photos, her hand clutching mine as I promised forever to the man standing across from me. She had whispered, "You deserve this," into my ear that night, and I had believed her. But suspicion doesn't fade, it grows teeth. And by the time I had proof, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. The videos weren't something I stumbled into. I made them happen. It was almost too easy, once I knew where to look and how to position myself so they wouldn't see me. Hotel hallways. A parked car by the marina, his hand on her back in the exact way he used to touch me when he thought the world wasn't watching. Every clip was a blade in my hand, and I was sharpening them for the right moment. That moment was now. I zoomed in on the hotel doors. They walked inside together, laughing like the world had no claws. Ethan bent to whisper something in her ear, and I saw her throw her head back. That same fake over-the-top laugh she always used when she wanted a man to feel like the center of the universe. It made my skin itch. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "She's running late, isn't she?" God. The irony almost made me laugh. I stared at his message, my pulse rising in waves. Daniel wasn't a friend, not really, but I knew enough about him to understand what this would do. I had studied him, the same way I studied them. He was loyal, steady, the kind of man who believed in building a life brick by brick. And Marissa had already gutted him once, years ago, before they got back together. He told me about it over wine once, when she'd stepped away to take a call. He forgave her. He wouldn't forgive this. The rain had started again, light but steady, tapping against the windshield. I could see droplets catching the glow of the street lamp, sliding down like they had all the time in the world. I didn't. My window for impact was closing, and if I missed it, all of this, every sleepless night, every hidden camera, every ounce of energy would have been for nothing. I thought about Ethan's face the first time I saw him with her. Not shock, not guilt, just annoyance that I had caught them early, before they were ready to tell me. Like it was their story to gift me, wrapped in a bow of pity. That was the moment I decided they wouldn't control the ending. My phone screen dimmed. I tapped it back to life and scrolled to Daniel's contact. His photo popped up, smiling, arm around her at some vineyard, both of them in matching sunglasses. I imagined the way his expression would change when he saw what I was about to send, the way the ground would tilt under his feet. I placed my finger over the send button. My whole body felt coiled, like I was standing at the edge of a building, ready to jump. Somewhere, deep down, I could still hear that old voice. The one that said revenge is messy. It changes you. It leaves you empty. Maybe it does. But in this moment, the only thing I felt was clarity. Cold, sharp, and absolute. They had taken my marriage, my trust, my history. I was about to take her future. I looked once more through the rain-speckled glass at the hotel entrance, where they were stepping into the elevator together. The doors closed with a soft chime I could almost hear from here. And that's when my thumb pressed down. The videos began to upload, the little progress bar creeping forward. 10%, 30, 50. Outside, the traffic light shifted from red to green, and I knew there was no turning back. At 98%, I felt the tiniest flicker of doubt. But then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was Ethan. One line. "Running late. Don't wait up." I smiled. The bar hit 100. And that's when the little paper airplane icon appeared. Sent. The files were gone from my phone and now lived in Daniel's inbox, ticking like a bomb no one could see. In a few minutes, his whole world would tilt. And maybe you're wondering how I got here. How I went from a woman who believed in marriage and friendship to the person sitting in a darkened car, calmly pressing the button that would end both. The truth? It didn't happen overnight. Before the storm, my life was almost boring in its stability. And I used to think that was a blessing. Our brownstone in Beacon Hill was my pride. The creek in the hardwood near the kitchen island, the morning light spilling through the bay windows, the faint hum of the city outside, they were the sounds and sights of a life I thought I'd built on rock. Ethan and I had been married 8 years. We had our little routines, morning coffee at the same 2 stools, evening walks with our golden retriever, Scout, and weekend dinners where he handled the grill and I made sides from recipes we'd collected over the years. I was a marketing director for a mid-sized publishing house. I worked long hours but loved the pace, the campaigns, the launches, the feeling of seeing a book I'd shepherded hit the shelves. Ethan was a financial consultant, always in crisp suits and speaking in a tone that made clients feel like their money was safe in his hands. Between us, we made enough to travel twice a year, keep a comfortable home, and treat ourselves without guilt. And then there was Marissa. She'd been my roommate sophomore year at Boston University. We bonded over bad dining hall coffee and the fact that neither of us had any idea what we wanted to major in. She was spontaneous, magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and have strangers leaning in to hear her stories. I was quieter, more deliberate. Where I made lists, she made last-minute plans. Where I worried about outcomes, she rode the wave. We were opposites, but it worked. For years after graduation, we stayed close. Dinners, girls' trips, calls that lasted until midnight. She was there when I met Ethan at a friend's engagement party. She teased me for falling for the guy with the perfect tie, but she also told me he was different from the men she usually met through me. "He's solid," she'd said, like it was the highest compliment. Marissa dated a string of men who never seemed to last more than a year. She'd call me crying after another breakup, and I'd bring wine, listen, reassure her she deserved better. Sometimes, though, there was a tone in her voice, like she wasn't sure she wanted better, just something more exciting. Looking back, I realize Ethan and Marissa were always a little too easy with each other. The casual touches when they passed in the kitchen, the way she'd laugh harder at his jokes than mine, the long hugs goodbye. At the time, I chalked it up to comfort. After all, they were my two favorite people. Why wouldn't they like each other? Life kept rolling. By my 35th birthday, Ethan and I had just finished paying off the last of our student loans. We were talking about finally starting a family, something I'd been cautious about because of my career and Ethan's travel schedule. But the idea of a child, of adding another voice to our quiet routines, had started to feel less like a risk and more like the next chapter. Marissa had gotten engaged to Daniel the year before. He was steady, dependable, a civil engineer with an easy smile. She joked that he was too good for her, and I thought it was just her way of deflecting when she felt out of her depth. Daniel was the first man I'd ever seen her genuinely settle with. He made her calmer, softer. Or so I thought. That spring, Ethan started working later. He claimed a new client was eating up his evenings, and I didn't question it, not at first. Marissa, meanwhile, started canceling our weekly dinners. "Daniel's swamped with a big project," she'd say, "and I want to be around when he gets home." It made sense. We were all busy adults. Still, there were moments, tiny, almost invisible, that didn't quite fit. One afternoon, I stopped by Ethan's office to surprise him with lunch. His assistant told me he was out with a client, but when I walked back to the elevator, I spotted Marissa's coat draped over the back of a chair in the lobby coffee shop. She wasn't there, and I told myself she must have been meeting a friend nearby. I didn't connect the dots. Not then. Another time, at a double date with them, Ethan ordered Marissa's drink for her without asking, a specific gin cocktail she'd been obsessed with in college. I remember thinking, funny he remembers that, but the thought didn't go any further. The red flag moment came in the middle of what should have been an ordinary Thursday night. We'd invited Marissa and Daniel over for dinner, something we hadn't done in months. I made roast chicken, Ethan opened a bottle of Pinot, and the four of us sat around the table like we always had. At one point, I went into the kitchen to get dessert. When I came back, I caught them, Ethan and Marissa, sharing a look. Not a long, romantic gaze, nothing that blatant. But it was the kind of look that carries weight. A silent sentence passed between them in a blink. And when I set the plates down, they both looked away at the exact same moment. I didn't know it then, but that was the pivot. The moment the ground shifted under my feet. The night after that strange look between Ethan and Marissa, I told myself I was imagining things. I'd always prided myself on not being the paranoid type, and I wasn't about to start dissecting glances like some insecure teenager. But the truth about betrayal is it doesn't knock politely. It seeps in. First, in tiny questions you dismiss. Then, in cracks you can't ignore. And finally, it hits you like a blade you never saw coming. My moment came on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day Boston wears like a uniform. I was working from home, deep in a campaign draft, when I realized I'd left a folder of contracts in Ethan's briefcase. He'd been rushing that morning and left it by the door. I reached for it, unzipped it, and found the folder exactly where I thought it would be. But there was something else. A hotel keycard, sleek, gold embossed, with the name of a boutique hotel near the harbor. We'd never stayed there. At first, my brain tried to take the easy road. Maybe it was a client perk. Maybe he'd had to book a room for someone flying in. But then I noticed the date written in Sharpie on the paper sleeve. Last Thursday. The same night Ethan had told me he was working late. I slipped the card back into the pocket and zipped the briefcase, my hands trembling. It would have been so easy to shove it to the back of my mind, but something in me refused to let it go. By lunch, I was at that hotel's front desk, my heart pounding so hard I thought the clerk might hear it. I told her I was picking up a receipt for my husband's stay. She smiled and printed it without question. The name on the reservation? Ethan Brooks. The guest listed under additional occupant? Marissa Hale. It felt like the ground under me vanished. I stared at that paper, willing it to change, to tell me it was a glitch or a cruel coincidence. But there it was in black and white. My husband and my best friend, sharing a room at a waterfront hotel while I sat at home thinking we were all still the same people we'd always been. The receipt had time-stamped room service charges, champagne, oysters, strawberries. The kind of romantic, performative cliches I'd once rolled my eyes at with Marissa when we were younger. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was meticulous, planned. They'd taken something sacred, my trust, my history, and turned it into a private joke between them. I walked out of the hotel into the cold drizzle, the receipt clutched in my hand like evidence in a crime scene. Boston's noise pressed around me, car horns, the slap of tires through puddles. But it all sounded distant, like I was underwater. When I got home, I didn't cry. Not then. I poured a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen counter, and stared at Scout curled up in the corner. I thought about all the dinners, the toasts, the late-night talks the three of us had shared, the overlapping years of friendship and marriage that I thought had made us unbreakable. It wasn't until later, lying in bed alone, that the tears came. Not soft, movie scene tears, the ugly heaving kind that leave your eyes raw and your throat burning. My chest ached with it. But grief has a strange half-life. It burns hot, then cools into something harder. Over the next few days, I began to notice details I'd missed before. How Ethan kept his phone face down, always locked. How Marissa had started wearing new lingerie brands she used to laugh at for being overpriced. How their conversations in my presence were just a shade too careful, like actors sticking to a script. The final nail came a week later. I was grabbing dinner alone at a small Italian place near Copley Square when I saw them. Through the rain-smeared window, at a corner table, leaning in toward each other, his hand resting on hers. It was intimate, familiar. Not the fumbling thrill of an affair in its early stages, but the comfort of something that had been going on long enough to feel normal to them. They weren't being careless, they were confident. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a drunken lapse or some heat-of-the-moment mistake. This was deliberate, premeditated. They had carved out space for each other inside the life I had built, and they'd done it quietly enough to believe I'd never notice. I didn't walk into that restaurant. I didn't confront them. I simply paid for my meal, went home, and sat in the dark. My mind ran through every possible response, screaming at them, telling Daniel, filing for divorce, cutting her out. But none of it felt finished. None of it felt like justice. And then, sitting there in that silence, I remembered something Marissa once told me in college after we pulled an all-nighter for finals. If you really want to get someone back, she'd said, don't just ruin their moment. Ruin the thing they think they've already won. I poured myself another glass of wine and stared out the window at the wet streetlights. That was it. The thought clicked into place with the precision of a lock turning. They thought they had each other. They thought their little secret was safe. They thought I was blind. They had no idea I was about to become the storm they never saw coming. Grief is heavy, but it's also exhausting. And exhaustion is dangerous. It leaves room for something colder to take its place. By the end of that week, I wasn't crying anymore. My eyes felt dry, my voice calm, my movements deliberate. If Ethan or Marissa noticed the shift, they mistook it for me moving on from whatever they assumed I didn't know. That was their first mistake. On Friday night, Ethan came home late again. His tie was loose, his hair slightly mussed, the faintest trace of perfume clinging to his jacket. Not mine. He gave me a tired smile, kissed my cheek like it was muscle memory, and went straight to the shower. In the past, I would have confronted him. Now I didn't even look up from my laptop. The less I reacted, the safer he felt. And the safer he felt, the sloppier he'd become. Marissa texted me that same evening. Miss you. Let's grab brunch soon. I stared at the screen, almost impressed at her nerve. The woman who had been sharing hotel rooms and candlelit dinners with my husband still wanted to sip mimosas with me like nothing had changed. I typed back a simple, absolutely, next week? That was her second mistake. Because while they were settling into whatever version of reality they'd built, I was beginning to draw up blueprints for the one that would crush them. The decision came fully into focus the next afternoon. I was sitting at a cafe in the South End, half listening to the chatter around me, when a couple walked in and took the table next to mine. They were laughing. The easy, unguarded laughter of two people who believed they were untouchable. It hit me then. That was exactly how Ethan and Marissa saw themselves. Untouchable. Protected by the assumption that I was too trusting, too gentle, too unwilling to make a mess. And they weren't wrong about who I had been, but they had no idea who they had just created. I thought back to the hotel receipt, the rain-smeared window, the restaurant where I'd seen them holding hands. Those weren't accidents. They weren't slips. This was a pattern, and patterns can be tracked, predicted, and, most importantly, weaponized. That's when my mind started piecing it together, not just catching them, ruining them. Not with one explosion, but with a chain reaction that would tear down the walls they'd built around each other. I could almost hear Marissa's voice in my head from years ago, teasing me after I'd over-prepared for a surprise birthday party. "You think too many steps ahead, Caroline. It's kind of scary." She had no idea how right she'd been. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. I smiled when Ethan told me about his client dinners. I laughed at Marissa's jokes when we finally met for brunch, listening closely as she dropped small, careless details about her week. The kind of details she thought meant nothing. The kind of details that, to me, were coordinates. They thought they were hiding in the shadows. What they didn't see was that I'd already flipped the light on. The pivotal moment came at that brunch. Marissa was wearing a new necklace, delicate gold, with a small diamond pendant. Ethan had bought me the exact same style for our 3rd anniversary. She noticed me looking at it and smiled in that way people do when they think they've just gotten away with something. I sipped my coffee and smiled back. Not because I believed her little performance, but because I knew this was going to be easier than I thought. Here's what they didn't understand. I didn't need to shout, or threaten, or even confront them. I had something far more dangerous. Patience. And patience is lethal when paired with intent. I left that brunch with a calm, eerie certainty in my chest. The kind you feel when you've already decided how the story ends. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and began creating a new folder. I didn't name it anything obvious, just a short, harmless word that wouldn't raise suspicion if anyone saw it. Inside, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed one sentence. "They think I don't know." Underneath it, I started listing dates, places, and any detail they'd ever let slip. Every business trip, every canceled dinner, every running late excuse. By midnight, the list was longer than I expected. I leaned back in my chair, rereading it. Each line was a loose thread, and I knew exactly how to start pulling until everything unraveled. They were underestimating me. They thought I was the woman I'd been before, the one who would walk away quietly to avoid confrontation. But the truth was, I had already started building the trap. And by the time they realized it, I'd be standing on the other side watching it snap shut. The first rule of revenge is simple. You don't move until you've mapped every inch of the battlefield. I spent the first week after the decision collecting intelligence, not on impulse, but with precision. My goal wasn't just to prove they were cheating. My goal was to create a web so tight that when I pulled the string, neither Ethan nor Marissa would have anywhere to run. The list I'd started in that hidden folder became my blueprint. I color-coded it, red for confirmed meetings between them, yellow for suspicious patterns, green for opportunities I could exploit. I kept a physical copy in a locked box in my office and an encrypted version on a USB drive tucked inside an empty lipstick tube. My first step was location tracking. Ethan's phone was easy. Years of shared accounts meant I could still log into our Find My iPhone without raising suspicion. Marissa's was trickier, but she had a habit of checking in on social media for even the most mundane things. Coffee shops, art galleries, her favorite wine bar. I created a fake account under the guise of a lifestyle blogger and followed her closely. She accepted the request within hours. Patterns began to emerge. They weren't meeting at the same place twice in a row, but they had a rhythm. Monday evenings, Thursday nights, the occasional Sunday afternoon errand. The second step was surveillance. I bought a discreet pen camera online, something that looked like a regular ballpoint but recorded in 1080p. I tested it on Scout, watching playback to get a feel for angles and sound quality. Then, on a Thursday when Ethan claimed he'd be closing a deal downtown, I followed him. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race. I parked a block away from where his GPS pinged and waited. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, Marissa appeared. They walked to a restaurant together, the kind with dim lighting and white tablecloths. I followed at a distance, slipping into a seat at the bar where I could see their reflection in the mirrored wall behind them. The pen camera sat between my fingers, recording every smile, every touch, every lean across the table. 2 hours later, I had the first piece of undeniable video evidence. The third step was infiltration. I needed access to Ethan's laptop, not just his phone. The phone would tell me where he was. The laptop would tell me what he was planning. He almost never left it unattended, but one Saturday morning he went for a run and left it open on the kitchen counter. I slid into the chair like I'd been waiting my whole life for that moment. His email was already logged in. Within minutes, I found receipts for flowers sent to MH at an address I recognized as Marissa's apartment. Attached notes read, "Thinking of you," and "Last night was perfect." I forwarded them to my hidden account and deleted the sent notifications so nothing would seem amiss. But that morning, I almost got caught. Ethan came back earlier than expected. I barely had time to close the laptop and slide into the pantry, pretending I'd been grabbing coffee beans. He didn't suspect a thing, but my pulse didn't slow for hours. The fourth step was turning Daniel, Marissa's fiancé, into an unwitting accomplice. I didn't want him to know yet, but I needed a direct line to deliver the final blow. I engineered a casual run-in at a hardware store, pretending to be surprised to see him. We chatted about home renovations, wedding plans, nothing of consequence. But I left with his personal email after offering to send him the contact for a contractor I highly recommended. The fifth step was securing backup. I wasn't naive. I knew Ethan and Marissa could try to deny, manipulate, or spin the story when it broke. So I created multiple fail-safes, a folder in the cloud under a fake name, a thumb drive hidden in the lining of my coat, and a scheduled email set to send the files automatically to Daniel and a select group of people if I didn't disable it every 48 hours. As the weeks passed, the stakes kept rising. Ethan started planning a weekend conference in New York. Marissa told me Daniel was going to visit his parents that same weekend. It was too perfect to be coincidence, and too good an opportunity to miss. I booked myself into the same hotel under a different name. I spent that Friday night 2 floors above them, recording every hallway kiss, every door closing behind them. I left a tiny motion-activated camera in the hallway, cleverly hidden in a bouquet cart that housekeeping had parked by the wall. When I reviewed the footage later, my hands went still. There they were, Ethan in his suit, Marissa in a black dress I'd seen her wear on a girls' night years ago, the two of them disappearing into his room without a glance behind them. The evidence was complete now. The last piece of the plan was delivery. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted a detonation. I wanted the truth to hit them in a way they couldn't deflect, where every person who mattered would see it all at once. That's when I remembered Daniel's birthday was coming up. They were planning a dinner for him at a waterfront restaurant, the same one where Ethan had proposed to me. I smiled when I thought about it, because I knew exactly how that night was going to end. Over the next week, I compiled the videos, receipts, photos, and messages into a clean, damning package. I made it easy to follow, time-stamped, labeled, undeniable. I wrote no commentary. The evidence would speak for itself. On the morning of Daniel's birthday dinner, I tested the file transfer twice. My finger hovered over the schedule send button, setting it to arrive in his inbox at 8:17 p.m., right when they'd be raising their glasses. I closed the laptop and sat back. For the first time in weeks, I felt still. The plan was ready, and they had no idea they were already standing in the blast zone. There's a unique kind of quiet the moment before you pull the trigger on something irreversible. It's not peaceful. It's dense. Heavy. Every sound feels amplified. Every breath deliberate. The morning of Daniel's birthday dinner, Boston was pale and gray. The kind of early spring day where the air smelled faintly of thawing earth and the harbor wind had bite. I sat at my kitchen island, coffee in hand, the file folder open on my laptop. The title read simply, "For You." Inside was everything. Hotel footage, receipts, screen captures of Ethan's messages to Marissa, the clip of them kissing in the hallway in New York, time-stamped with brutal clarity. I checked the send settings for the 10th time. 8:17 p.m., delivery to Daniel's personal email, his work email, and, because I wasn't leaving anything to chance, a group thread with his parents, sister, and 2 mutual friends. I'd built redundancy into the system. Even if Daniel's phone somehow died, the truth would find him. But email alone wasn't enough. I wanted the reveal to happen in real time, in a place they couldn't hide from. That's where the dinner came in. The restaurant was one of those elegant waterfront spots with floor-to-ceiling windows and white linen tables. I'd made a reservation under a different name, one that would never connect back to me, at a corner table with a perfect sightline to theirs. The hostess wouldn't suspect anything. She'd just see a well-dressed woman dining alone. By 7:30 p.m., I was already seated, a glass of wine in hand, my phone on silent but facing up. From my vantage point, I saw the staff setting up the private dining area in the back for Daniel's party. They brought in flowers, polished glasses, checked place settings. At 7:52, Daniel arrived, looking relaxed and unsuspecting in a navy blazer. He greeted the early guests with hugs, shaking hands, thanking them for coming. I saw his parents beam at him, his sister leaning in for a whispered joke. At 8:04, Ethan and Marissa walked in together. They weren't even trying to hide the comfort between them. She touched his arm as they walked, her laugh bubbling out too easily. He pulled her chair out for her. Daniel didn't notice. He was across the table, speaking to another guest. I watched them like a hawk, sipping my wine slowly, letting the anticipation settle deep in my bones. At 8:15, the waiter poured champagne for the toast. Glasses clinked, guests leaned in. Ethan's hand rested casually on the back of Marissa's chair, fingers brushing her shoulder like muscle memory. 8:17. I tapped, send. It took only seconds. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Daniel's phone buzzed once on the table, the light cutting through the dim room. He picked it up mid-laugh, still smiling. Then his brow furrowed. His gaze darted to the screen, scanning. The smile collapsed. He scrolled, stopped, scrolled again. His lips moved, counting dates maybe, or mouthing disbelief. Then he froze on the New York hallway footage. Even from across the room, I could see it hit him like a punch. His knuckles whitened around the phone. He looked up, straight at Marissa. She was mid-sentence with Ethan, but when she saw his expression, the blood drained from her face. What is this? Daniel's voice cut through the chatter, low but sharp enough to turn heads. Marissa blinked, her mouth opening and closing, eyes flicking to Ethan, who was already shifting uncomfortably. Daniel didn't wait for an answer. He stood, holding the phone out like a weapon. Everyone at this table, look at this. Look at what these two have been doing behind my back. The room fell into a hush, broken only by the faint sound of the video playing. Ethan and Marissa in that hallway, kissing like no one in the world mattered but them. Gasps rippled through the table. Someone muttered, "Oh my God!" Marissa reached for Daniel's arm, but he yanked it away. "You've been sleeping with my best friend's husband," he said, voice cracking on the words. "While you smiled in my face, while we planned our wedding." Ethan started to speak, but Daniel cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Save it. There's more. So much more." He swiped, showing them the dinner footage, the receipts, the messages. "I've got a whole archive, thanks to someone who clearly had the guts to tell me the truth." Now the whispers started. Low, sharp-edged. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the room like he was calculating an escape route. Marissa's mother, yes, she was there too, was shaking her head, lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Daniel stepped back from the table, tossing the phone down like it burned. You two deserve each other. And you deserve to watch everything you built burn. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving silence and two pale, frozen faces behind him. But I wasn't done, because in the moment Daniel left, my second delivery triggered. At 8:22 p.m., every person in Ethan's firm, from his boss to the interns, received an anonymous email containing the same file. The subject line was, "Your senior financial consultant's code of ethics." Ethan's industry thrived on trust, discretion, and reputation. Seeing him in hotel rooms with another man's fiancé, time-stamped during work trips he'd billed to clients, was career suicide. By 8:25, his phone was buzzing nonstop. He didn't answer any of them. He just sat there, face rigid, staring at the untouched champagne. Marissa wasn't spared either. At 8:27, her Instagram, the one she curated like a glossy magazine, began hemorrhaging followers. The videos had been sent, anonymously, to a popular Boston gossip account that specialized in unmasking local frauds. Within minutes, the clip of her and Ethan in that hotel hallway was everywhere. By 8:30, she was trending, and not in the way she liked. I watched them both unravel from across the room. Marissa, fumbling with her phone, whispering frantic half-sentences to Ethan. Ethan hunched slightly forward, the weight of it settling in. The guests at their table had stopped pretending to be polite. Some were openly filming, others texting under the table. I finished my wine, signed the bill, and stood. On my way out, I walked past their table. Ethan looked up at me, eyes narrowing with recognition. "Caroline," he started. I didn't stop. I just let my gaze flick between the two of them, slow and deliberate, before I said, low enough for only them to hear, "You thought I didn't know." And then I left. The air outside was cool, briny from the harbor. I walked to my car without looking back. Later that night, long after the adrenaline had faded, I got a notification. Daniel had replied to my email. "Thank you. They're done. And they know exactly why." I smiled. Not because I was happy. This wasn't the kind of story that ended with happiness. But because I'd kept my promise to myself. They hadn't just lost me. They'd lost everything they thought they'd won. And the final blow? 2 weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Marissa's landlord had served her an eviction notice. Daniel had owned the apartment she lived in. He'd bought it as their future home. The lease was in his name. She had 30 days to get out. Ethan wasn't returning her calls anymore. Revenge doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like the air after a storm, still, thick, and strange, as if the world hasn't realized something has changed forever. In the days following Daniel's birthday dinner, the fallout spread fast. Ethan's professional world crumbled first. Word about the videos reached his firm before he even stepped into the office Monday morning. By 9:45 a.m., he was on leave. By Wednesday, he was terminated, officially for breach of conduct and client trust. In his industry, reputation was currency. He'd just gone bankrupt. He tried to reach me twice that week. Calls, texts, even one email titled, "We should talk." I didn't answer any of them. The silence was deliberate. Punishment in its purest form. Marissa's destruction was more public. The gossip account didn't just post the videos once. They posted updates, commentary, even old photos of her and Daniel, framing her as Boston's engagement ring homewrecker. Brands she'd collaborated with dropped her. Her carefully curated social media presence bled followers until her account went private. And Daniel? He didn't just break the engagement. He took the apartment. Within days, she was crashing on a mutual friend's couch, dragging suitcases that didn't look nearly as glamorous without the backdrop of her old life. The best part? Neither of them could hide from each other's ruin. Ethan couldn't offer her the lifestyle she'd been angling for. She couldn't offer him a social image worth salvaging. They were each other's only option, and that option was poisoned. For me, life became quieter. Scout still greeted me at the door every evening. I still drank my coffee by the bay windows. But the quiet wasn't the same as before. This quiet was mine. Not shared, not compromised, not tainted by the possibility that someone was using it against me. Still, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a small part of me that kept watch. Revenge isn't just an act. It's a state of mind. You don't just shut it off. You wait, listening for echoes. The first echo came a month later. I was in line at a cafe when I heard my name. I turned, and there was Daniel. He looked lighter somehow, like shedding Marissa had taken 10 pounds off his shoulders. We chatted politely, like people who'd been through something together but didn't need to put it into words. Before he left, he said, "You know, you could have just told me. But you didn't. You made me see it. I'll never forget that." I smiled. That was the point. And I thought that was the last chapter. It wasn't. The final twist came exactly 6 weeks after the dinner. I was leaving work when my phone buzzed with a new email. No subject line. No sender name I recognized. Inside, there was just one photo attachment. I opened it. The image was grainy, obviously taken from a distance, but there was no mistaking what it showed. Ethan, sitting alone at a bar, staring at a small velvet box in his hand. And next to him on the counter, a note. My note. The one I'd once written him on our anniversary, in my handwriting. "You thought I didn't know. I hadn't left that note at the dinner. I hadn't left it anywhere for him to find." Which meant someone else had. I scrolled down. At the bottom of the email was one line. "Figured you'd want to know. He's next." No signature. No clue who sent it. I stared at the screen, a slow smile creeping across my face. Because revenge, it seemed, wasn't finished with Ethan yet. And this time, I wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Thank you for watching my story. I know betrayal can cut deeper than anything else. And sometimes the only way to move forward is to take back your power. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation like this, or seen someone get the revenge they deserved? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the Velvet Revenge channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.